Welcome to our first webinar presentation in our series on Living Life with Multiple System Atrophy, or MSA. My name is Samantha and I am one of the MSA Nurse Specialists at the Multiple System Atrophy Trust, which covers the UK and Ireland. This presentation will be a basic introduction to MSA and is for people who have been diagnosed with MSA, as well as their families and carers. We have a more comprehensive guide to MSA on our website, and we can post this to you if requested. Today, we will cover what is MSA, who gets it, how a diagnosis is made, the symptoms of MSA, and what support is available to you to help to manage it. MSA is a rare progressive neurological disease that causes nerve cells to atrophy or shrink in different areas of the brain. This leads to problems with balance and movement, speech and swallowing, and autonomic bodily functions such as bladder or blood pressure control. The type of symptoms experienced and the rate of progression is individual to each person living with MSA. Because MSA is progressive, symptoms do worsen over time, and sadly, it does shorten lifespan. It is difficult to be specific about this, as each person's experience will be individual to them. Most people will find their mobility worsens over time, as does speech and swallowing, blood pressure control, and bladder and bowel issues become more complex. As it is rare, many people have never heard of MSA. You will find that some professionals won't be familiar with it, and the person living with MSA will become the expert. MSA affects around 5 people per 100,000, so that is around 3,500 people in the UK and Ireland living with MSA at any one time. It affects adult men and women in all ethnic and social groups, and usually starts between 50 and 60 years of age. It is 45 times rarer than Parkinson's disease, and this is why many people will have never heard of MSA. The cause is still unknown, but it is not thought to be hereditary, so it is unlikely to be passed on to children or grandchildren. Although we do not know what causes MSA, we do know what happens in the brain. There is an overproduction of a protein called alpha-synuclein, which is also seen in Parkinson's disease. We all have alpha-synuclein in our brain, in our heart, the gut, and some muscles. In the brain, it tends to be concentrated near the tips of the nerve cells, neurons, which are responsible for the release of chemicals between the neurons. This is called neurotransmission. Although the main functions of alpha-synuclein are still not fully understood, we do know it seems to be associated with the regulation of the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that is involved in controlling the start and stop of voluntary and involuntary movements. Here is a picture of the alpha-synuclein protein, a comet-shaped protein seen under a microscope, which is why we use the comet as the MSA Trust symbol. It is found in 3 specific areas of the brain. The top area, the basal ganglia, is also the area affected in Parkinson's disease, so some symptoms are similar. It affects movement, particularly smooth movement or the initiation of movement. The second area is the brainstem, which affects autonomic function. This is the part of the body which works under involuntary or unconscious control, such as blood pressure control and bladder control. The third area is the cerebellum at the back of the brain, which affects balance and coordination. Diagnosis of MSA is made by a neurological examination. A specific criteria is used by a neurologist or Parkinson's disease specialist to give a possible or probable diagnosis. In the early stages, it is difficult to reach an MSA diagnosis, as many of the symptoms are common to other neurological conditions. As there is no definitive diagnostic test, it may take several visits to a neurologist to get a working diagnosis. Being given a diagnosis of MSA can be devastating, and it is perfectly normal for someone to feel scared, overwhelmed, or fearful of the changes that MSA will make to their life. The person with MSA and their family may experience a range of emotions whilst coming to terms with the diagnosis, and this is understandable. Anxiety, depression, and a labile mood, where someone has difficulty managing their emotions, is common in MSA, but help to manage this is available. We can describe lability of mood as laughter without mirth and crying without sadness. Alongside the multidisciplinary team, someone with MSA may wish to access help and emotional support from a counsellor, psychologist, from their GP, or other local services such as a hospice. There are two types of MSA. MSA-P means the person will have Parkinson's type symptoms initially, and MSA-C, which means they will have cerebellar type symptoms initially. Both have a similar prognosis, and both do shorten a person's lifespan. As there are three areas in the brain affected, we see three sets of symptoms which overlap. The cerebellar symptoms affect balance and coordination. The Parkinson's symptoms include slowness of movement, stiffness and rigidity of muscles, and the autonomic symptoms, which must be present to get a diagnosis of MSA, include problems with blood pressure, bladder control, and others, which we will cover later in the presentation. There is currently no specific treatment or cure for MSA, but there are ways to manage some of the symptoms, and each person should be supported by a multidisciplinary team or MDT. An MDT is a group of diverse professionals working together, usually including therapists. The MDT would aim to deliver person-centered and coordinated care and support for the person with MSA. So if we now look at the symptoms of MSA, the three areas of the brain will cause different symptoms. The symptoms that look like Parkinson's disease include slowness of movement, along with stiffness or rigidity in the upper body, which can lead to dystonia, an increase in muscle tone and spasm, which may be painful. There may be a tremor, which is different to a Parkinson's disease tremor. This can be jerky and uncontrollable, called myoclonic tremor. Some people may experience freezing of gait, which means they stop suddenly whilst walking and cannot continue for a few minutes. Initiation of movement may be difficult, such as turning over in bed or getting up out of a chair. Falls are common with the balance and freezing issues. The head and neck muscles may be affected later in the progression, and this is known as anticolis, where the head falls onto the chest to one side, and it is difficult for the person to lift their head up. And we can also see muscle weakness of the legs and lower body over time, making mobility more difficult. Looking at the cerebellar symptoms, speech becomes quiet and then slurred over time, particularly when someone is tired. Some people will lose the ability to communicate verbally, and we are able to support people alongside their speech and language therapist to help with voice banking and communication aids. Other symptoms include difficulty when standing unaided, unsteadiness with potential falls, and poor coordination. If we now look at the autonomic symptoms, erectile dysfunction in men is often an early symptom, and women can also experience sexual dysfunction. Another early symptom is bladder issues in both men and women, and this may be one of 4 issues. Urgency, where someone needs to rush to the toilet. Frequency, where they have to go often and may not pass much urine. Passing urine a lot at night time, called nocturia. And the inability to empty the bladder, which is called retention. There can be a combination of all of these bladder issues, and these can change over time. Constipation is also a common symptom, as the whole of the gastrointestinal tract is more sluggish, and the person with MSA may need medication to control this. Postural hypotension is when the blood pressure drops suddenly on a change of position, usually from lying or sitting to standing. This puts the person at risk of falls, feeling dizzy or lightheaded, or even fainting. It can also contribute to fatigue and something called coat hanger pain across the shoulders when the muscles aren't getting enough blood supply. This drop in blood pressure can also occur after eating, after sexual intercourse, or when straining on the toilet. We can see some breathing difficulties, and referral to the respiratory team may be needed for further investigation. Some people may have sleep disorder problems where they are not getting enough oxygen and may need a specialist sleep study. They may also have problems with their vocal cords, causing noisy breathing or stridor, which may need medical intervention. Other symptoms may include an increased emotional response, laughing or crying more often and sometimes inappropriately. This cannot be controlled by the person with MSA. Sleeping problems include shouting whilst asleep or throwing their arms and legs around, often disturbing their sleeping partner. Vivid dreams, which may be distressing but can be improved with medications. We wouldn't expect to see problems with memory and thinking or a dementia in most people with MSA, but people may take longer to respond when you are speaking to them. They may have some difficulty with word finding, but this doesn't mean their intellect is affected. They can understand what is being said, but just need a little extra time to respond to you. MSA doesn't usually progress rapidly. It progresses gradually over months and years. If the person with MSA suddenly deteriorates over 24 to 48 hours, it is likely to be caused by something else. The most likely cause is an infection, either a urine infection or a chest infection. Because of the autonomic dysfunction, the person with MSA may not display common signs of infection, such as a high temperature. What will be noticeable is all of the MSA symptoms are suddenly worse. If this is the case, the GP should be contacted to rule out an infection. Other possible causes are dehydration, constipation, or a recent change in medication. Professionals who can support someone affected by MSA in the MDT include your GP, who will make referrals to other professionals and assist with symptom management. A neurologist, ideally a movement disorder specialist or Parkinson's disease specialist, who you should see every 6 months. The Parkinson's disease nurse, who, if you have one in your area, will see you every 6 months as well. If the Parkinson's disease nurse appointments are then alternated with the neurologist, this means the person with MSA will be reviewed every 3 months, which is the best scenario. If you don't have a Parkinson's disease nurse in your area, you may be referred to a neurology nurse instead. A physiotherapist to help with mobility and to help prevent falls. The person with MSA should see one as soon as they're diagnosed and will continue to be reviewed regularly. An occupational therapist will assess the person with MSA at home and provide equipment and aids to make things safer and easier for you. A speech and language therapist will support with speech and swallowing needs, both of which can be affected in MSA, and they may refer you to a dietitian. Social services can offer individual assessment of care needs for people with MSA and their carers. A continence advisor will help with bladder, bowel, or erectile issues. A psychologist can offer counselling or emotional support. A hospice to help manage symptom control, as they offer expert support to people living with long-term conditions. Only 5% of hospice services are end-of-life care, and they offer many other services which vary from hospice to hospice, but which can dramatically improve quality of life. And also the Multiple System Atrophy Trust, and we will cover what we do at the end of this webinar. In conclusion, these are the key things we would like people to take away from this introduction to MSA. MSA symptoms are variable, and MSA is unique to the person. Symptoms can change over time, as can the progression. Prognosis is individual and difficult to determine. Be aware that any infection or a change in medication, as well as dehydration or constipation, can cause symptoms to suddenly get worse. Seek advice from your GP, as antibiotics may be required. It will take someone with MSA longer to recover from an infection. They should get help to treat the symptoms as and when they arise. Try to plan for the future early where possible. MSA is a progressive condition. This means it is necessary to think and plan ahead, as equipment, carer support, and your future needs and wishes will all need to be considered. We at the Trust can help with this and discuss your individual circumstances. Make sure you get referrals to health and care professionals we have mentioned in this presentation. And finally, remember the MSA Trust is here to help support you and guide you through your journey. The MSA Trust supports those living with MSA, their carers, friends and family by providing an MSA Nurse Specialist telephone and email support service Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You can find the nurse for your area on our website. Our social welfare specialist can give you information about financial help, including grants for adaptations and equipment. They can also talk to you about how to access care and support and other non-medical issues you may have. We provide information materials and fact sheets about living with MSA and symptom control, all of which are available on our website. We run a network of support groups located around the UK and Ireland with help from our volunteers. And we also run digital support group meetings. We oversee a supportive online forum on Health Unlocked. We give support with communication aids and voice banking. We provide accurate and up-to-date information through MSA News, our regular magazine, and through our website. We offer education sessions and have specialist guides for health and care professionals working with people living with MSA. The MSA Trust is funded entirely by voluntary donations, and all our services to people affected by MSA are completely free of charge. Our contact details are on your screen now. Thank you for listening today, and please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. Please note that this presentation contains basic information and is not a substitute for medical advice from your specialist. Please refer to our Guide to MSA on our website for more in-depth information about the topics discussed today.